my last video, I actually said it was my last video with long hair, but then it's still not Friday yet, but I'm like pre-filming a little bit, so instead now you get one more with my hair this length. And today I'm having a really good hair day, which then has me second guessing, like, do I actually want to cut it all off tomorrow? I'm probably gonna go like to here, to like there. Do I really? But it's so fried. It needs to go. Enough on that. Today we're gonna be talking about sports romances. Sports in real life. Don't really care about them outside of hockey. Sports and books though, I eat that shit up. I eat it up. I love me some good sports romances. I've done dedicated like hockey romance specific rec videos because I read the most hockey romances because hockey is my favorite sport. But for this video in particular, I am only doing one rec per sport. So I have 9 book recommendations for you with 9 different sports, because otherwise I can't really control myself and I probably would have ended up with like at least half hockey book recommendations in this video, and we're not going to do that. I'm feeling very sporty as I'm getting ready to enter into my sports romance era here. I got a lot of good books here, and let's go ahead and jump in. First up, let's start with track. A track romance, a running romance, which I actually hate more than anything else, but I love this book, and that's Coach Me by Shanora Williams. Also, you are going to notice there are a few coach athlete books on here. What can I say? I'm also an absolute sucker for that trope as well, but this one follows our heroine. I think her name is Amber. Why did that just pop in my head? I think her name is Amber. Maybe, I could be wrong on that. But she is a freshman at this new university, and she is a very, very talented track runner. And I believe she even gets a full scholarship to this university. And she's really excited to go. However, her dad, I think, used to be her coach, and now he is no longer with her anymore. So she is kind of struggling a little bit when she gets to this university and having a different coach. And then also on top of that, when she shows up and she meets her new coach, and he's kind of a little bit of a dick. He definitely sees her potential, but he's just kind of a bit of a moody, broody guy. He has a whole kind of like backstory. Of course, he has a reason for being like that, which I'll let you find that out when you read it. But anyways, as they start training together, he really recognizes her talent and knows that she could really go far. And also she's kind of like running from some things, excuse me, in her past that he then, once he finds out about, then he's very much like, I will do whatever it takes to protect you and like screw everyone who ever hurt you before, obviously. But they can't be together because of the age gap, because of the status of them being coach athlete. So they obviously have to fight that a little bit. And it ends up being their romance. I will say in this one, I remember the track being pretty prominent. I read it years ago, but I do remember it being a pretty big part of the book. So again, if you want a sports romance that actually like has a lot of the sport incorporated, I do remember this one having like a pretty heavy hand with that, which I personally like. If I'm reading a sports romance, I want at least like a scene or two, you know, of her like actually racing, actually running, and like a lot of the scenes obviously then tend to like spur around like practice and stuff, which I like. I also just realized what mug I'm using as well today. I pretty much always use this one on game days, and the day that I'm filming is a game day. I mean, watch, they'll probably lose, but didn't do that on purpose for today. This I did put on purposely for the sake of the video. What should we do next? Let's do basketball. That's again another little bit of a different one. I feel like there are not a ton of basketball romances out there. I think actually when I was trying to pick one, I think I've only read like 3 basketball romances maybe, and I picked King of the Court by R.S. Gray to talk about today because I quite literally don't know if I've ever talked about this book on my channel before, except maybe in a wrap-up. This was a part of a readathon years ago. This was Sam from Sam Reads Little's pick for it, and I remember being like, I don't think I'm gonna enjoy this one, quite frankly. I don't know. I think like it was just, I didn't think that it was gonna be my vibe, but I loved this one. It's a second chance. It is slightly small townish a little bit, but don't let that scare you off because you guys know how I feel about small towns. So if I can get down with it in this book, I feel like a lot of you guys can too. But our heroine, she works at this little diner in this small town where then now there's a lot of buzz going on because the U.S. men's basketball team for the Olympics are going to be training in the city, like nearby this little town. So they're like, we're going to have a bunch of these like basketball players, a bunch of these like NBA superstars, you know, staying around the town. And she's kind of like, I couldn't care less about any of that. Like, I have my own problems just trying to like survive in this world. She like is working herself to the bone basically just to make a basic living. And she's like, I don't really care about these NBA superstars. That is until one of them comes into her diner and he spots her and he's kind of like, oh, she's kind of cute. And she's like, I want nothing to do with you because like, I know what kind of guy that you are. And he's kind of like wanting to prove to her that he's different, you know, that he's not like the rest of the guys, that he like actually could care about her. Yeah, things end up happening and it does end up being a second chance with this one. I just remember loving our heroine a lot. Like she had a lot of depth. She had a lot of things that she had going on in her life. And I totally understood the way that she kind of immediately dismissed our hero. And it was kind of like, how could you ever understand anything that I have going on in my life? Like I have these very big real problems, and being an NBA millionaire superstar like is so far off my radar. And the way that he's very like patient with her and willing to kind of like show her that he is a good person and like trying to prove himself to her a little bit. I loved it. And I listened to the audiobook of this one, and I remember really liking the audio. It was like one of the first audiobooks actually I think I ever listened to, and I did really enjoy it. So like I said, I don't think I've like ever talked about this book on my channel, and that's a crime honestly, because I remember loving it. Next up, I mean, let's get it out of the way. If I'm going to be talking about gymnastics on here, what other book am I going to be talking about besides Balance by Lucia Franco? If you've been on my channel since the very beginning, you know, this has been my favorite book series, romance book series, for 6 years now. Because what, 2020? So 2020, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, yeah, 6 years. That's crazy. 6 years of loving this book and telling everyone, well, it's not for everyone because it is very taboo, but this one follows Rhea and Kova. So Rhea she really wants to go to the Olympics. She is a gymnast and that is her goal, but the gym that she is at currently is not going to be able to get her there. And she really wants to train at an elite level in order to achieve this. And her dad is like, okay, you know, I am going to try to support you in this dream. So I have this old buddy Kova who owns a gym and he is a former Olympian himself. Let me call him up, see if you can go and train with him in the next state over, see if we can make this work. And as soon as Rhea arrives, Kova clocks her and is like, I don't think you have what it takes. Like, just because your dad has money and is willing, and like, I'm kind of doing this as a favor to him. So it's kind of like dad's best friend-ish a little bit. Just because like I'm doing this doesn't mean that I actually think that you're capable of being at that level. And she's so taken aback by that and so ready to prove him wrong. And it is a 5-book series following her journey in gymnastics and then also her relationship with Kova, who is her coach. So obviously it's very taboo, very forbidden, very off limits. The age gap is big. It's everything that I love and more though. They're so toxic. It's so angsty. They're so bad for each other, but they're also so good for each other. These two are like the definition of soulmates to me. Like I love this series. I talk about it all the time. Gymnastics is very, very, very prominent in these as well. So again, if you want your sports romance, I would say like King of the Court. I don't remember it being super basketball heavy. The Off Balance series, insanely heavy with gymnastics. So much that there's literally, oh, I forgot that this one's signed. So much so that there is literally a glossary of gymnastic terms at the front of the book because there is so much gymnastics in this. Me personally, I love that shit. I ate it up. But just a heads up on that. And obviously, like I said, it's really taboo, so it's not gonna be for everyone, but it is for me. And these two are my all-time favorites. Like, I love them forever and always. And you knew if I was doing a sports romance recommendation video, they were gonna be in it, obviously. Now we go with football. Let's go with football now. Once again, I don't think I've read really well, I wanted to talk about Head in the Game, but I talk about that book all the time, and I have a lot of other coach athlete books on here, so I didn't pull that one. So instead, I think the only other football romance that I've ever read is Dare You to Hate Me by B. Celeste, but I love this book. So it is a second chance childhood friends to kind of strangers to lovers a little bit. So our heroine in this one, she has a really bad home situation when she is younger, and she decides to run away, and when she's going to, she ends up asking her best friend, who is our hero. I think they're like 16 at the time, and she asks him like, will you run away with me? And he has a really great home life. He has football. Like, he has a lot of things going for him, and he's like, you're my best friend. Like, I don't want you to go, but also like, I can't go with you. And so they ended up spending years apart, and they end up getting reunited then. I think it's like 4 years later. I think they're like in the middle of their college journey. Like, they're not freshmen. I think they're maybe like nearing even the end of graduation. They end up reuniting again when our heroine ends up going to Linden University, and she gets a job at a coffee shop like off campus, and our hero ends up coming in and running into her. He's immediately like, what happened? Like, I never heard from you ever again. And she's kind of like, I didn't think that you wanted to. And they have a lot of things to work on. They have a lot of distrust, I guess, that was kind of built, or just more, I guess, like time and like space and experience that they both have had in the years apart, that like the people that they were when they are younger are not necessarily the people that they are now, and trying to like reconcile that. And it's their romance. I love this one. Our hero, I think his name is Aiden. He is like the sweetest, most patient man ever. I loved him. I loved the way that he was with our heroine, and like that he was like gentle with her, but also like held his ground of being like, you just kind of up and left me, and like I'm not just gonna kind of forget about that. Absolutely loved it. This is the first book in a series, in the Lynn and You series. I haven't read any of the other ones. I kind of like fell off on them, but I would like to go back and read more, because I think they all center around football, and like I don't know. I've watched more football in the past year than I have in my entire life, and I don't dislike it. It's just not, it's no hockey, Now, let me hit you with a novella of a sport that, like, I don't know if a lot of people watch or, like, are big fans of, but water polo, and that's Treading Water by B. Subjakin. So this one is a coach-athlete novella, and our heroine in this one, she has one goal in mind, and that is making the U.S. Women's Olympic water polo team. And so when she ends up getting this full ride to this scholarship at this university, she does not really have, like, anything going for her in her home life. Like, she has, like, if I'm remembering correctly, she has a pretty rough upbringing, and I think she's almost kind of responsible for taking care of a younger sibling, and like she has an absentee parent, so she doesn't have like the money, to spend on school herself, so that's how she ends up getting a scholarship and is able to play. And when she shows up at this university, then the newest coach there is also her like idol, her like sports idol, her like water polo idol, whose like career she had followed, was like completely obsessed with, and is really excited when she shows up to see him, and then he is a complete and utter dick, and she gives it back to him just as bad. Like, she's also like, it's pretty toxic, but again, it's fun, and it ends up being their romance. Obviously they cannot be together because of the coach-athlete dynamic, and because of everything that she kind of has riding on her scholarship and on this like career path, but obviously that doesn't end up stopping them. It doesn't end up stopping them. And I will say, since this one is a novella, obviously it's got to move a little bit quicker. I'd say it's pretty low angst because of that, but I really liked it still. And again, water polo isn't a sport that I really like knew anything about. Like, I've probably watched it like on the Olympics, but never like actually paid much attention to it. So it's in there, it's like a factor in it, and like if you don't really know a lot about the sport, I do feel like it's still pretty easy to follow along. So anyways, a nice little short and quick one to throw in the mix here. Okay, so let's see, we got baseball, hockey, volleyball, Olympics. We got 4 left, right? So let's go with baseball next, because isn't baseball starting or like getting ready to start, right? I don't know. I don't really pay that much attention to it, but I think I've only read a handful of baseball romances, and the one that I wanted to highlight today is Endgame by Indy Valentine. This is the first book in the Atlanta Boys series. The second book actually comes out by the time that this video goes up, like maybe 2 weeks from now. It comes out at the end of March. But this one starts off with Dakota and Callaway, and it is a best friends brothers baseball romance with our heroine Dakota, and she's struggling at the beginning of this book. She recently lost her parents. However, she does get a new job opportunity as a photographer for what's the Atlanta team? It's the baseball team in Atlanta. I'm completely blanking on their team name right now. Is it Strikers? Maybe. I could be wrong on that. Anyway, she ends up getting a job as their new photographer. So that's kind of like a bright light for her. That's something to kind of like look forward to. And one day when she's driving home, her car ends up breaking down. So she calls up her bestie, and her bestie isn't able to come, but she's like, hey, I'll send my brother and he'll come and pick you up and, take you where you need to go, which is to her ex-boyfriend's house to finish picking up the rest of her stuff. Because again, now she's fresh off a breakup as well. And that ends up being Callaway. He answers the call of his sister and is like, sure, yeah, I'll go help out your best friend. And when he shows up, he's just like immediately pretty taken by Dakota. Obviously, like, he's known her before, like he's met her before, but truly this is kind of the first time that he's like seen her. And he, of course, is a player. I think he's the pitcher of the baseball team that she is going to be shooting for, so they're going to be in forced proximity. Immediately, he just decides that like Dakota is what he wants, and he is just one of those guys that like as soon as he decides that, he's going to get what he wants, even no matter how far like Dakota tries to push him away, tries to keep him at an arm's length. He's just not having it. He's like, I've decided that you're going to be mine, and you just have to get on board with that because I'm kind of obsessed with you. And eventually she ends up getting worn down, because who wouldn't be worn down by a tattooed baseball player like demanding that he's in love with you? I don't know. I couldn't resist it. So anyways, it ends up being their romance. Oh, sorry, my nose is so itchy. I feel like I'm gonna have to pause this video so much to just like, or like break up this video so much just to like have been itching my nose. Maybe I need to like, I don't know, stop and take a break for a second. I really love this book. There's definitely the baseball aspect in there, but I would say if you're not like the most into baseball, that it's not like hitting you over the head with it either. Okay, we're down to 3. Let's go ahead and do hockey. Why not? Why not? We've been waiting long enough, haven't we? And I picked Offside by Avery Keelan. Again, I have read, out of all sports romances, the most hockey one. So it was really hard to try to narrow down to just one. But I was looking at my shelves and I was like, what one do I feel like I've not talked about in a while? And I really don't think I've talked about Offside in a long time. And this is the first book in the Rules of the Game series. I've read the first 2. I think are there maybe 3 total. So maybe I just haven't read the last one. I really enjoyed book 2 as well, but this one is my favorite. This one follows our heroine. She gets dumped on her 21st birthday and she is not having that at all, and she gets dumped by the superstar of the hockey team at her university, who her brother is also on, so it's also like that was her brother's teammate. So then when all this kind of goes down, people kind of got to pick their sides, and she finds a lot of her friends, even her brother, all the hockey team kind of siding with him in the breakup, and she's kind of like, what the fuck, like, am I kind of left on my own now just because like he was a dick and broke up with me? So then one night when she's out, she ends up bumping into her brother and her ex-boyfriend's biggest rival out at the bar, who is the star of the like nearing campus's university's hockey team, kind of like propositions herself to him a little bit. She never thought that she would do that. She never thought that she would go anywhere near him, but now she's kind of like looking for a little bit of revenge. However, he rebuffs her advance at first because he's like, you are completely hammered. We cannot do that. Let me walk you home. She's still kind of like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna like get with him. And then she ends up throwing up all over his shoes. And instead, he just turns out to be a very nice guy, gets her home safely, puts her to sleep, and just kind of leaves it at that and is like, I'm not going to embarrass you any further. But then they kind of strike up a bit of a friendship afterwards. And as, again, like how she's kind of been like flailing by herself now at her own university, she does really kind of find a friendship with him and some of the people in his life and kind of realizes that they're maybe more accepting of her over there. And they do start off as just friends, but obviously the tension rises and rises and rises. And our hero is kind of on thin ice back at his own university after some like scandals and stuff, and just kind of like being like a little bit of a party boy type vibe. So he's kind of like, okay, this is my year to kind of focus and just focus on hockey. Like, I'm not really gonna like do anything else. I'm just gonna keep my head down. But then when she kind of comes crashing in, she ends up disrupting that a little bit, and it ends up being their romance. I loved this book so much, and I feel like, yeah, I don't know when the last time is that I talked about it, but it's so good. So good. Like, it's just the two of them, I just really bought into like the slow burn of their relationship and just like the true genuine friendship that the two of them formed before they moved into the next level of their relationship. I just completely loved it. And yeah, you really just check it out. Okay, we are down to our last 2. Let's go with Volleyball. And I have another coach athlete romance on my hands here, and that is Break For You by KB Rowe. So this one I read years ago, and I remember being completely consumed. I literally couldn't put it down when I was reading it, and I did not realize when I was reading it that it was not a standalone, and the other books were not out at the time. And I remember reading it and being like, what do you mean this isn't the end? What do you mean? And being so like, I need those second books. And then now I still have not finished the series, because then like by the time the second one came out, I was distracted, whatever. I still need to go back and finish, but I think it's a trilogy, all following our one couple here. So it is, once again, a coach-athlete age gap forbidden romance. And this one is a little bit more forbidden because it is a high school volleyball player and her coach. So her parents, I don't remember what happened with them, but she does not live with them, or they died or whatever. So she instead is released into the custody of her very old grandfather, who like, he loves her, he does take care of her, but obviously like he's old and like he's not really like, you know, able to be a super present parent. And she has not, she's gotten herself into a lot of trouble over the years, and that's kind of like why now she's ended up with him also. And one thing that she has going for her though is that she is a very talented volleyball player. player, and that is kind of her new motivation, is to get back into school after, I think she was maybe in juvie, like I think she has like an ankle monitor on, and kind of her like one thing that she has going is to be able to go back to school and getting to play volleyball again. And her main coach is more than willing to have her back if she's going to like kind of stick on the straight and narrow path and kind of like keep her in line. And when our heroine ends up showing up back to school, she doesn't want anyone to know like about what has happened with her. But then when the season kicks off and the new volleyball coach is introduced, like assistant coach, it is her former obsession. He was a very talented volleyball player, like professional volleyball player, I think went to the Olympics and everything. And she like had this huge crush on him growing up, like literally posters of him in her room. So she is immediately kind of like awestruck by him, but she's also just very bitter and jaded by everything that has kind of happened in her life. And she kind of has the attitude of being like, I know best. And our hero is having none of it. Once again, it's pretty toxic between the two of them. You'll just have to read it to find out the rest of it. I feel like this is turning into a long video, but anyways, a really fun time. But like I said, be warned, even though it's thick, this is not a standalone. This is not. So as you're reading it and you're like, how is this going to wrap up in time? It's not. It's 3 books. But I remember, like I said, I literally couldn't put that down because it was just like so toxic. Last but not least, I don't normally do this, but I'm gonna just plug just at the end here. That's why I'm like, I'll include it at the end. If people are still around, great. If not, one of my books that I've written is a sports romance. It is a sports romance between an Olympic gymnast and an Olympic swimmer, and they are filming a documentary leading up to the next Summer Olympic Games. They both, TJ, our heroine, she has been to one game and she's kind of dubbed the Golden Girl. She won gold medals at her previous one, and she kind of has these expectations and hopes that she will be bringing home gold again for Team USA. And our hero Caleb, this will actually be his 3rd Olympic Games. He again is a great swimmer, gold medal winner, but he's very cocky and is kind of dubbed as like America's bad boy. And they both are asked to start filming a documentary following their journeys leading up to the Olympics. And they both happen to live in the same apartment building as each other, so it does end up being some forced proximity in there. And they had a run-in at their first games that TJ remembers, Caleb has no memory of, where he was, you know, a little bit of a dick to her, and she has not forgotten that. So when they start being around each other again, he cannot figure out why America's Golden Girl hates him. As they prepare for the games, you know, it's stressful. They're stressed out. And Caleb ends up proposing a little friends with benefits situation with them for them to be able to blow off a little bit of steam with each other. And it ends up being their romance. This is one of my favorite books that I have written. I absolutely love TJ and Caleb. Caleb ended up being such like a way more of a simp than I thought he would ever be, just as I was writing it. But yeah, I wanted to include it in case if you were looking for an Olympic romance, and since it is sports, this is my first sports romance. I have another one coming that I, you know, have kind of talked about a little bit here and there called Goalie. It'll obviously be a hockey romance. But yeah, if you're looking, especially as we're getting back into the warmer weather, if you're looking for some warmer summery vibes, then maybe you'll like Starting Line. So anyways, that is it for today's video. Next, I think I'm going to have, I don't even know actually, have I figured that out? I don't know. So instead I'll just cut it here. So anyways, that is it for today's video, and I will see you when I see ya.